Hey everybody, welcome back to Pets 101. I'm your host Nick. This is going to be a deep dive episode, meaning I'm not going to be getting into the ins and outs of caring for an axolotl. I might touch upon it briefly, but this is going to be more of a, hey, this is an animal that exists, and here's a little bit of information about it, because um, I, I went through a journey. I'm basically going to tell you the whole story about, my dealings with axolotls, but if you want to, basically there's more just like tigers, there's more in captivity than there are in the wild, and they're not so hot when it comes to defending against predators and that kind of stuff. Where they evolved from, they naturally didn't have any predators. They were the apex predator in ponds, and then through invasive species, most likely due to human human intervention. Now they are pretty much threatened everywhere. Like literally, a crawfish can get into a pond, and now the axolotls are no longer the apex predator. So if you do want to help, I recommend donating to places that are trying to, breed and rehabilitate axolotls. Like Haven is where I ended up sending my parents to. My axolotl parents, not my actual parents. But yeah, so this is just kind of getting you to know about the fact that they exist. They're not doing so hot. I don't believe that they're technically an endangered species. Again, I mean, this is not a well-researched episode. This is just me kind of doing a little PSA on the limited amount that I know. As always, in all of my videos, I always recommend, please, if this is something that interests you and I actually managed to pique your interest, do your research. Find out ways that you can help. But honestly, taking care of one or trying to breed them yourselves is not recommended. And again, I'll get into the story. So basically, if you haven't looked it up already, a axolotl is a aquatic salamander, and I think the best way I can describe it is, and this is actually how I got my girl to agree to adopt them, is they kind of look like Toothless from How to Train Your Dragon. I do believe that an axolotl, Toothless from How to Train Your Dragon, when the animators made him, they definitely drew upon a lot of different sources, and I do believe axolotl was one of them. So they have these cool little tendril things on their heads. Those are actually their gills. This is actually how they breathe. The hair, I guess you could call it, on them. They do come in a variety of colors, mostly just a darker green. The ones that we had looked nearly black. Again, adding to the toothless aesthetic. But so these first came to my attention when I was working at the pet store, and somebody came in with a 40-gallon tank and two axolotls and said, "Hey, can you guys take them? These guys are free for adoption." And being how the pet stores usually work is if we have the room, we will be like, absolutely, we will find a new forever home for them. And I just thought they were the coolest looking things. I knew nothing about them. They came with a bunch of cichlid pellets, of all things. So they didn't even come with their own type of food. They actually came with just pellets that you normally would feed cichlids. And I liked them. I thought they were neat. And my girl visited me at work, and so I was just like, "Hey, look at that! Doesn't look like Toothless How to Train Your Dragon." It comes with the whole setup, like literally, the the only thing that'll cost us is a little bit of extra water and electricity for the filter, but other than that, they come you know ready to go. And so I managed to convince her. We get them home. We were told that they were two females, and we had no reason to doubt otherwise. So we named them Ellen and Portia. Obviously this was before the whole Ellen's, I mean, boss debacle or whatever. I thought it was a cute pair of names. Still love Ellen's comedy. I mean, whether or not she is mean to her coworker, I don't know. This is still like a fresh development thing that the Ellen show's ending. Not even the point of the story. Basically, Ellen and Portia. We kept them. Um, so they came with some sand, some tiles, and on the ground and stuff. And so I guess one of the things about them, and this is one of the reasons why I wouldn't recommend taking care of them, is you absolutely can't do gravel or even decently sized rocks. If it'll fit in their mouth, uh, they'll get it in their mouth, and that actually we almost lost one because of that. I'll get into that later. So anyway, so I'm researching, like what to feed them, and so it'll say, like, oh, they'll eat red wigglers, and so, we bought some red wigglers, and put them in the tank, and they never went after them. The red wigglers would, burrow into the sand, go get under the tiles, and then eventually die. And, you know, uh, then they're like, oh, they'll, eat, uh, ghost shrimp. So, then we threw ghost shrimp in there, and they, I don't know if you've ever seen a ghost shrimp, but they can go pew, and so they would chase them around. They couldn't catch them, and then pretty soon we just had ghost shrimp in the tank, and then so the only thing they really seem to go after, which we never get to see them do, but rosy red minnows are one of the few fish that they can eat because they have soft spines. Again, if it'll fit in their mouth, they'll eat it, regardless of the strength of their spine or not. So, I guess rosy red minnows have pretty gentle spines. So, we would throw like 5 in at a time, and next day there'd be 5, and the next day there'd be 5, and then the next day there'd be 2, and one of them looked exceptionally fat. And it's just like, okay, so I guess they're eating them, but we don't want to do this too often because they're getting, a little obese. So their main diet, unfortunately, ended up being like the cichlid pellets for a bit, but you know, um, so the only reason we could tell the difference is because one of them had green eyes, one of them, didn't. The green-eyed one was Portia, and so, um, so yeah, basically it has to be like sand and tile because they spend most of the time. They can swim a little bit, but most of the time they like to just kind of, um, you know, do kind of like a gentle like walk amongst the bottom, kind of like how hippos. I don't know if you've ever seen hippos underwater, but they really don't swim. They just kind of like bound across the water until they can get to a shallow spot. They can swim when they want to, but they usually aren't motivated to. So anyway, um, all of a sudden, one day, like we figure out enough of like what they eat to basically keep them a decent weight, and then but except one of them seems to be getting more and more obese, even though we didn't really do any extra feeding or whatever. And then all of a sudden, boom, eggs. So obviously one of them was a male, one of them was female. So this is how we come, so now, at first we were just like, what the heck is all of this? Is there like, fungus, and because it just looks like really filmy stuff all over the place. I mean, there was hundreds of them, probably 100. I mean, but I say hundreds, it was probably 100. Numbers don't have any meaning in this podcast, by the way. I make up statistics and I admit it fully. Nearly anything that I talk about is 90% because it's not a real number. So it was probably around 100 eggs. I don't know. I guess that's pretty average for what they do. So we looked it up. We're like, okay, crap, it's eggs. All right, well, I thought they were both females. So did they just lay unfertilized eggs sometimes just to get rid of the pressure? No, they only release eggs when they've been fertilized. So apparently, the one that was fat and then suddenly skinny, we obviously determined to be the mom. So that was Ellen, and then Portia was apparently a dude. And so, we panic and do as much research as we can, and like how to keep these guys alive. First of all, you can't keep the axolotls with them because they are going to eat most of the eggs. Well, that's where they all went. We found out the next day after a lot of them disappeared. So we had to separate the two of them. Um, you know, the hatching and keeping them alive thing was a nightmare. And so that's kind of why this is more of a deep dive than a how to take care of them because basically I don't want to skip too much, but we had to grow live, live food for them because when they're young, they only chase after stuff that moves, and they start off microscopic. So you're talking about like microscopic food that we're talking about. So you know, um, eventually when they get older, they can do brine shrimp and stuff. But in this case, God, it's been a while. But basically. Um, like really teeny, like live stuff, like as an example, sea monkeys, but it wasn't sea monkeys. You get the gist. So basically, you have to keep them, separate from the parents, separate from each other, because they will cannibalize each other. That's actually unfortunately how we lost a few, because we didn't realize they were big enough to start eating each other until it's like, uh-oh, there's one missing some limbs, there's one, which thankfully they could, regrow, and one of them did end up like, losing an arm and growing it back. But anyway, so. We had to separate them. We had to feed them food. It was very difficult to get. In fact, there was only 3 different types that they told us, that we could find in researching online when they were that age, and only 2 of them you could even get through Amazon. So, you basically had to, you know, do some eggs, hatch them, dump the water in, hope that there's some that are alive for them to go after, and basically the whole ordeal was kind of a nightmare. And out of 100 eggs, we only got a yield of 5. That means we killed 95 of their babies. And believe it or not, that's actually a really good number. So turns out the fact that us amateurs that had no idea what we were doing and were just panic buying from Amazon and like doing our research, you're supposed to feed multiple sources of protein when they're young, and unfortunately, like the only one that we could get from Amazon or even like get to yield were just a single source of protein for quite a while until they got big enough that, and hungry enough that that they actually started to eat thawed bloodworms. I think I said brine shrimp earlier, right? I think brine shrimp is the one that we hatched, and then the unthawed frozen bloodworms. So basically, if they get hungry enough, um, they might actually go after stuff that doesn't move. But basically, once we were able to do multiple, proteins, they kind of, exploded in size. But it was really touch and go there for a while. Somehow we managed to make it out with 5, which is amazingly a good yield. So that just shows one of the main reasons why they're so endangered. It's like, yeah, they lay a lot of eggs, but that ain't gonna help them when there's them eating the eggs, other predators eating the eggs, other prey eating the eggs because the eggs aren't predators yet. And then they're miniature and then they hatch. It's kind of like the plight of the sea turtle. It's like basically in order to get to be a 200-pound turtle that nobody in the ocean really wants to mess with you, you had to get really lucky for quite a while in your lifetime growing up. So, um, obviously, during the course of researching how best to take care of these kids, we also then found out that like the tigers, they are more in captivity than they are in the wild. We obviously had a breeding pair that we had no idea if they were brother and sister. They were raised, both as female in the same tank, so most likely they came from the same batch. So most likely we had an inbred brood. So we realized we were out of our depth when it comes to the adults. So we found a place, like I said, called Axie Haven, and had them shipped out. And that, again, another reason why I don't recommend you getting them yourselves. And then if you realize, okay, this is too much, then sending them out. Every single review I have seen about sending axolotls through the mail has been a horror story. You pay extra. It costs over $100 to ship these guys with an immediate, important, as fast as you can, but as safely as you can. Very fragile, live animal. The shortest amount of time that you can. And literally every review that I read said that the post office, and again, I'm not faulting the post office, especially like, um, it's just like if it isn't set up for success, then it isn't set up for success. I'm just saying that like I basically paid $100, and they did not get there the next day. They did not get there the day after. They, like every other story I'd read, they got there multiple days later. Um, Thankfully, in that regard, axolotls are relatively hardy. So even if they have what do you call it, like ammonia burn on their gills and stuff, quite often they can make a recovery. So they got delayed. They got there days and days late, but they both survived. And what was really cool is the place actually sent us, updates on how they're doing. So I'm not sure what happened to, Portia. We never renamed him. I'm not sure what happened with Portia, but I do remember the last time we checked. Ellen had been paired with I believe, a nice-looking albino guy, and they were planning on doing a batch with them. But yeah, so now they're out there, hopefully bring the population up, and we made sure to we kept one, and rehomed 4 other ones out of the babies that we got, and made sure to fully inform all 4 of the people that that took them in, exactly what they're in for, exactly what they should expect, like this is what they're eating, this is what they're gonna eat. This is going to be a solo tank, animal. So, unfortunately, a lot of the times, like there's just these really cool exotic creatures that usually end up being a solo one that require a lot of gallons, and so, most people usually end up giving them up when they find that out. They're just like, well, I could have like, 24 fish in a 40-gallon tank, or I could have one axolotl. Like, why would I do that? So, unfortunately, they do need to be a solo pet. One of the many issues with trying to take care of them. So, you know, if they have other fish in the tank, they're either going to try and eat them if they can fit in their mouth, or if they can barely fit in their mouth. Oh yeah, so I didn't even tell you. So these guys are so dumb. The reason why they need sand or tiles, not gravel or rocks. I thought it was being clever, and so I got turtle rocks. So decent sized rocks that I was just like, okay, there's no way they're going to fit them in their mouth. And then one day, pretty sure it was Portia. I come in, and then I see Portia with swelling in his neck. And so I was just like, oh God, he's sick. I got to look up what this is. And through a series of web searches and like really staring at him, I finally came to the conclusion that I think the dummy tried to swallow a rock. And what's insane is that this rock, I thought I had picked out all the rocks that could not possibly ever fit in their mouth. He managed to find one that it was so big that in order to not break his jaw to get it out, I had to spin it to just the right direction that he had ingested it in, because every other way that he could have tried, it wouldn't have fit. So you understand what I'm saying? I'm holding like a slippery, you know, water salamander. I have like tweezers, and like I literally can't pull it out without knowing that I could tell like after a certain point I was just like, nope, this is the peak, this is the limit. Any more I pull out, and it's gonna literally break his jaw on the way out, and he's gonna die anyway. So I actually had to keep on spinning it until I got to just the right oblong, shape that I could very gently take it out. Thank God he was all right. Honestly, um, I was in such panic mode that it didn't even occur to me to, take him to the vet. It was just one of those where it's like, uh, when you're panicking and like, you're not really thinking straight, and you're just like, I got to deal with the situation now, now, now. I'm not generally a man of action, but in that case, I was. So, and it thankfully turned out okay. I really probably should have gotten professional help, but, because I definitely came close. In my eyes, like, he was already a goner. Like, I stupidly forgot that it's just like, okay, he can breathe fine. They can go days without eating. It's like he's breathing through his gills, not through his mouth. You know what I mean? Like for some reason, I just thought that like if I didn't get it out right away, he wouldn't make the trip to the hospital, to the vet. And thankfully it all turned out okay. But I mean, like this is the kind of animal that we're dealing with here. That's why this is not a hey, here's what size habitat, here's what food they should eat. I mean, I'm giving examples just as anecdotes to the story, but this is not going to be one of those. You should go out and get an axolotl. Like these guys. I mean, they're just they're super cool looking. They're sweet. They're simple. They're one of those where you know like they evolved in what made sense at the time. You know what I mean? Like so like they evolved in places where like literally they were the biggest thing in the pond. So like everything that they ate was like little soft shelled snails and like small shrimp and um, like like the tiny stuff that's usually in ponds and stuff that feeds off the plant matter, and they couldn't protect themselves against a medium-sized fish to save their life. So that's why they can't be in a tank with any other fish. Literally, if the fish is small enough for them to swallow it, they'll swallow it. If it's any bigger than that, then for whatever reason, those gills must be tasty as all heck, because other fish love to go after and attack their gills. And pretty soon, if they whittle them down so that they can't breathe, they'll die from suffocation. It's kind of wild. So yeah, they're a very unique animal to be able to have for a pet, and it's one I don't recommend. But I do like them enough that I want to make sure that they make it. I want to make sure that we try and help them out like we do the pandas. And like I said, I think the best way to do it is to not take one into your home. Trying to have a breeding tank, even for an intermediate to expert. The difficulty and the lack of yield, I think, will eventually get to you. The sheer difficulty of like you have to hatch and grow the food for them to hatch and grow, and they're cannibalizing each other. They're eating their own eggs. Um, it's like if you live anywhere even decently warm, you need to have a chiller. They like to have it a nice cool 60 degrees. Now, who keeps their house at 60 degrees? You know what I mean? So you actually need a chiller in the water. They actually prefer it cool, which means that pretty much anything that you want to put in there with them for them to eat that's live is going to die from being cold, and then if it's not moving, they usually won't go after it. So um, it was an experience, and it was one that definitely educated me and made me aware of them. But it's definitely one where if you were looking at them like, oh, isn't that so cute? They look like Toothless from How to Save Your Dragon. Don't make the same mistake I did, please. I implore of you. Go volunteer at an axolotl place if you need to get your axolotl fix. I just it's nuts. It's nuts anytime that I find out that there's more of an animal that exists in captivity than in the wild. When I found that about tigers, I was like, that's insane. That's got to be the only animal that's like that, right? No, axolotls are also in a similar boat. So I hope that I've at least turned you on to the fact that there's even something out there that exists that is called an axolotl. And again, that maybe you clicked on this out of sheer curiosity when you saw AXOTL. What did this guy have? I got to click on this because he clearly had a stroke when he was typing it. He got too drunk when he was posting this, because that is clearly not how you spell that word. And then it turns out it is. So they're a weirdly named weird animal that I wanted to just make sure that more people knew existed, that they kind of need your help, but not necessarily sticking them in a tank in your house, or trying to do breeding on your own. But it's I love the variety of life that exists on Earth, and they're definitely in the cool category, in my opinion. And it definitely is a chapter in my life that I'm glad that I have, and it was an experience that I'll be able to think back on that memory and be like, oh my God, remember that whole hatching debacle? But it's something that I just want to try and help you not to have to go through. And hopefully this is a good word of warning. I mean, definitely research the crap out of them if you're interested. I mean, they're definitely worth a look. Some of the colors and pictures that you're going to be able to find, I mean, those are the outliers, okay? When you see these crazy, like, like reds and whites and, like all these, colors, it's like, no. That's more rare. More often, they're going to be a very boring, kind of like, dull, dark blackish, greenish, color. And, even I guess the green eyes of Portia aren't exactly the most common. So, even that cool little feature is pretty rare. So, normally they're not that interesting. Obviously, people want to take pictures of the really cool looking axolotls. Um, and hey, shout out to, there was a person that did end up adopting. It was pretty cool. I saw this one that they adopted a severely obese axolotl. Like it was almost scary, because now that I've seen them, I did not know that they could get to this size. But just like any other fish, or most animals, if you keep feeding them, they'll keep eating as long as there's room in their stomach, whether they need it or not, whether they have enough stored fat or not. And this person, took in an axolotl. I believe it was probably under absolute units. That's that subreddit, and he was just like just rescued him from a in a way negligent household. Like it was, I think it was something along the lines of like they just had an automatic feeder that they didn't bother like dosing out, and so the thing was just getting dumped like 20 pellets a day, and so it ate as many as it could, and so it had gotten quite fat, and so they were like, it's on his way to recovery. Stay tuned for more photos. Never got the follow up. Hope he was okay, but I do appreciate people that take ones that are already in that situation, and trying to make it better. So I'm not pooping on anybody that has an axolotl in their house. I definitely don't want you to think that. If you do, there's obviously different varying circumstances. Obviously that axolotl was better off in that person's house than the previous house. I think it's debatable on whether or not it would be good for a rehabilitation axolotl place if that person should then give it to him. But if you know what you're doing, and obviously it's going to be in better hands than the situation that you find them in, then great. But I don't think that you should actively go out looking for axolotl breeders to try and take one home. It's just that's not quite how it works, because if you have two, they probably won't get along. If they do get along, you're probably gonna have to deal with that. If you do have to deal with that, you probably won't be prepared, both mentally and with all the appropriate accoutrement that they will need for said breeding. Multiple tanks, multiple setups, like like what if you did get a yield of 100 and you managed to save all 100? Now you have 100 separate little individual cups. You know what I mean? So basically, axolotls are cool. Look them up. Help them out if you can. Not really a huge fan of owning one, but it is what it is. I came into the situation through ignorance and through not gaining knowledge. I wanted to share it with you. So I hope you enjoyed my little rant about them. Again, once again, this is a deep dive, so I hope that people that are fans of the show know to not click on a deep dive expecting to learn how to take care of said animal. Just this is going to be some cool information about them. So we'll get there.